Ferdowsi. Hakim Abulqasim Ferdowsi Tusi, born around the years 932-936 in Tus, Samanid state in the territory of modern-day Iran, was a towering figure in Persian-Tajik literature and the author of the epic poem Shahnameh, the Book of the Kings. He is celebrated as a national poet in Tajikistan, Iran and Afghanistan. Ferdowsi lived in the 10th century in Khorasan, a region of Greater Iran that includes present-day Tajikistan. 3 centuries earlier, in the 7th century, the Sassanid Empire, a powerful pre-Islamic Persian state, was conquered by the Arabs and became part of the Caliphate. Under the Caliphate's rule, Persian language and culture were suppressed by Arabic. However, by the end of the 9th century, the Caliphate had weakened, leading to the rise of the local Muslim dynasties. Ferdowsi lived during the reigns of 2 dynasties, the Samanids and the Ghaznavids. Ferdowsi came from a family of Dehqans, Eastern Iranian landowners who thrived during the Sassanid period but whose influence diminished under the Caliphate rule. Scholars consider Eastern Iranians to primarily refer to Tajiks, whose population today exceeds 40 million in the region. According to Encyclopedia Iranica, alternative names for the Tajiks are Dehqans, which translates to farmer or settled villager, in a wider sense settled, in contrast to nomadic, and was later used to describe a class of land-owning magnates as Persian of noble blood, in contrast to Arabs, Turks, and Romans during the Sassanid and the early Islamic period. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, Tajiks are direct descendants of the Iranian people recorded since the first millennium BC, forming the core of ancient populations of Sogdiana, Bactria, and Margiana. The Dehqans were patriotic and were dedicated to preserving the cultural traditions of Greater Iran, including legendary tales of kings. Ferdowsi, whose poetic name means heavenly, highly valued knowledge. He famously wrote, "Seek the path to wise words, traverse the world to gain knowledge." For his profound wisdom and knowledge, he was honored with the title of Hakim, meaning sage or scholar. Ferdowsi was married and had a son and a daughter. One of the women mentioned in Shahnameh is believed to be his wife. His wife also came from a Dehqan family. She could read and write, played the harp, and was well educated. The Samanids, who ruled the city of Tus, where Ferdowsi was born, claimed descent from the Sassanid general Bahram Chubina and were instrumental in reviving Iranian culture. The Samanid administration used the new Persian language instead of Arabic and commissioned translations of pre-Islamic Persian texts into New Persian, or so-called Tajik Persian language. The Samanid ruler of Tus, Abu Mansur Muhammad, commissioned several local authors to write Shahnameh, which influenced Ferdowsi's epic. It should be noted that the founder of New Persian poetry was Abu Abdullah Rudaki, who lived and wrote his poetry during the Samanid rule. Historical records confirm that Rudaki was born and died in Pajrud, in the territory of Greater Khorasan. To this day, Panjrud carries the same name and is a village in Panjakan district of Tajikistan. Shahnameh was initially being written by poet Abu Mansur Daqiqi, but after writing just 1,000 lines, the poet passed away. Ferdowsi, starting around the year 975, continued the work and devoted more than 30 years to it. During this period, the political landscape shifted as the Ghaznavids replaced the Samanids, and the new ruler, Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi, was uninterested in Shahnameh. Upon arriving in Ghazna, Ferdowsi met with renowned poets of the Sultan's court, Unsuri, Asjadi, and Farukhi. Initially unrecognized by them, Ferdowsi was challenged to a poetic contest. Each of them would recite one line of poetry, and if Ferdowsi could compose a fourth line equal in quality to theirs, he would be deemed worthy to be admitted to the court. After hearing Ferdowsi's line, the court poets were so impressed with him that they accepted Ferdowsi as their peer and introduced him to Sultan Mahmud. He presented the Shahnameh and recited a dedication praising the Shah. Legend has it that the Sultan promised 1 gold coin for each couplet of the Shahnameh, totaling 60,000 gold coins. But Sultan Mahmud did not fulfill his promise. One version suggests that this was because Mahmud's ancestry led to a Turkish slave to the Samanids, while the epic's core theme was that only descendants of ancient rulers had the right to rule Iran. According to another account in the manuscript Tarikh-i Sistan, the history of Sistan, Ferdowsi recited Shahnameh to him for several days. Mahmud said, "The entire Shahnameh is nothing but tales of Rustam, and in my army there are thousands of Rustams." Ferdowsi replied, "May the ruler's life be long. I know not how many men like Rustam are in his army, but I know that the Almighty has not made another human like Rustam." Saying this, Ferdowsi bowed and left. Mahmud sent Ferdowsi several silver coins, according to some sources amounting to 20,000 coins. Offended, Ferdowsi paid his bathhouse attendant, caravan guides, and distributed the rest of it to the poor. The Sultan Mahmud interpreted this act as mockery and ordered Ferdowsi's execution by having him trampled under the feet of the elephants. Ferdowsi was forced to flee the Ghaznavid lands. Nizami Aruzi Samarkandi, the 12th century poet and chronicler, wrote, "Ferdowsi was well aware of Mahmud's cruelty, so he left Ghazna at night and was hiding for 6 months while Mahmud's envoys searched for him in Tus. Only after long wanderings was Ferdowsi able to return home." It is said that sometime later, Sultan Mahmud heard verses of exceptional beauty and power from his vizier during a walk and learned that the author was Ferdowsi. Nizami Aruzi recounts that, filled with remorse for his past actions, Mahmud ordered 60,000 gold dinars and other valuable gifts, such as fine dishes and gold-embroidered robes, to be sent to Ferdowsi as a reward for his epic. Unfortunately, Ferdowsi did not live to receive these honors. As the Sultan's caravan bearing the precious gifts entered Tus through the Rudbar gate, Ferdowsi's casket was being carried out through the Razan gate on the opposite side of the city. Nizami Aruzi also recorded that Ferdowsi's daughter, a woman of exceptional honor, refused the Sultan gifts, saying, "I have no need for them." Upon learning of this, Sultan Mahmud was first enraged and then deeply sorrowful. He realized his folly would not ensure his place in history as a pitiable trickster and unworthy tyrant. This would be his legacy before the Almighty. While people would read the Shahnameh for 1,000 years, they would remember how Mahmud begrudged the great poet a few sacks of base metal. Meanwhile, Mahmud's own victories, conquests, buildings, and immense wealth would be forgotten. Already in the 15th century, Abdurrahman Jami wrote, "Gone are Mahmud's glory and fame. Now, what do we know of him? He could not appreciate Ferdowsi." Ferdowsi was buried in his garden in Tus, as the local authorities did not permit his burial in the city cemetery. It is said that the day after Ferdowsi's burial, the chief religious figure of Tus visited the poet's daughter Manija, seeking permission to move his remains to the city cemetery. When she asked for an explanation, he recounted a dream in which he had seen Ferdowsi in paradise. When he asked the poet what he had done to earn such an honor, Ferdowsi replied with a verse, Follow the saying of the Prophet, seek the way, cleanse your heart of its darkened flows. Later, the ruler of Tus ordered to raise a mausoleum on the grave of Ferdowsi, and the place became a destination for pilgrimage. Today, Hakim Abulqasim Ferdowsi, the great classical poet of Tajik Persian literature and the author of the epic Shahnameh, the Book of the Kings, is celebrated as a national poet in Tajikistan, Iran and Afghanistan, and revered around the world. Shahnameh, a literary masterpiece. Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings, is an outstanding monument of New Persian, or so-called Persian-Tajik literature, and the national epic of the Iranian people. It recounts the history of Greater Iran, from ancient times up to the advent of Islam in the 7th century. Comprising of 60,000 couplets, or 120,000 lines of verse, making it twice as long as Homer's Iliad and Odyssey combined. Shahnameh is the longest poem ever attributed to a single author. The name Shahnameh was initially used for various prose and poetic collections, with a unifying theme, the most significant of which is the version written by Ferdowsi between approximately 976 and 1011. Although the work began under the Samanid dynasty and was dedicated to them, Ferdowsi completed it after their fall and dedicated it to the Turkic ruler Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi. Earlier collections were originally called Khudaynameh, Khvatay Namak, but the title Shahnameh eventually became more widespread. Other versions existed, but only fragments have survived, preserved through retellings by various authors. Ferdowsi spent more than 30 years compiling Shahnameh, drawing upon a vast body of Iranian folklore and integrating episodes from Muslim history, ancient Iranian myths, pre-Islamic epics, and the Avesta, the sacred scripture of Zoroastrians. He also incorporated 1,000 couplets written by his predecessor Daqiqi, who unfortunately died young before completing his own version of the work. The Shahnameh is traditionally divided into 3 parts: mythological, heroic, and historical. The poem holds immense linguistic significance, as it is written entirely in the New Persian language, which had been heavily influenced by Arabic. Although Abu Abdullah Rudaki, the founder of New Persian literature, born and laid to rest in what is now Tajikistan, made a tremendous contribution to the revival of the language, it was Abulqasim Ferdowsi, another representative of the Eastern Iranian stratum, who immortalized it through his masterpiece Shahnameh. Ferdowsi's work has been preserved in its entirety and has inspired countless other epic works, influencing not only heroic but also romantic epics. The Shahnameh recounts the reigns of 50 kings, starting with the first king and the first man Kayumars, who represents the initial period of all mankind. Following him were rulers such as Siamak, Khushang, Tahmuras, and Jamshid. King Jamshid, a classical king organizer, taught people navigation and sewing, organized the Nowruz, New Year celebration, and subjugated Divs, evil spirits. However, overcome by pride, he ordered the Divs to build a great throne for himself, attempting to equate himself with God. As a result, the divine favor of Far, which grants the right to rule, turned away from him, forcing Jamshid to leave his country and wander in exile. As punishment for Jamshid's hubris, God sent the tyrant Zahak to Iran. Zahak usurped Jamshid's throne and reigned for 1,000 years. During his rule, Ahriman, the embodiment of the evil spirit, tricked Zahak into kissing his shoulders, causing 2 snakes to grow there, To appease them, Zahak fed the snakes with human brains until the blacksmith Kaveh led a successful rebellion in favor of Jamshid's great-grandson Faridun. Faridun had 3 sons: Salm, ruler of Rum; Tur, ruler of Turan; and Iraj, ruler of Iran. The brothers killed Iraj, but his concubine gave birth to a daughter, who in turn gave birth to Manucher. Under King Manucher, we see the youthful heroic adventures of Zal, whose love for the beautiful Rudabe constitutes one of the most splendid episodes of the Shahnameh. Zal's son is the most celebrated Persian hero, Rustam. Manucher's successor, Nausar, is captured by the Turanian king Afrasiab and perishes. The war, which occasionally paused, spanned the reigns of 5 Iranian kings and lasted over 300 years in total. In the first battle, Rustam grabbed Afrasiab by the belt, but the belt tore, and the Turanian king escaped, prolonging the war indefinitely. Rustam's main feats and his tragic duel with his son Sohrab occurred during the reign of Kaikovus. Kaikovus' son, Siyavush, quarreled with his reckless father, fled to Afrasiab and married his daughter, but was eventually killed. Revenge for Siyavush becomes the main driving force of the intensified war between Iran and Turan. This war, full of twists and heroic adventures, ended in Iran's favor. Kaikosrov, Siyavush's son, eventually captured the hiding Afrasiab, from whom he once barely escaped himself, and executed him. Thus, the struggle with Turan ended. A romantic episode unfolds between the hero Bijan and Afrasiab's daughter Manije. As Rustam and the earlier heroes fade from the narrative, the focus shifts to the new king Lohrasp and his son Goshtasp. During Goshtasp's reign, the prophet Zardusht, Zoroaster, appeared and Iran adopted the religion he preached. This part of the Shahnameh is attributed to Daqiqi, not Ferdowsi. However, the Turanian king Arjasp, Afrasiab's grandson and successor, rejected the new faith, leading to the resumption of the long-standing conflict with impious Turan. The main defender of Zoroaster's religion is Goshtasp's son Esfandiar, a hero almost as illustrious as Rustam. Known as Pandadat in Pahlavi, Middle Persian language text Ayadgar-i-Zariran, written no later than 500 CE, Esfandiar performs a series of incredible feats before finally ending the war. The heroic epic concludes here. Toward the end of the Shahnameh, the narrative transitions from mythological tales to real historical events, culminating in the Arab conquest of Iran. The most important work of New Persian literature, Shahnameh has been defined as the national epic of Iranian people and an encyclopedia of their culture. It is dedicated to the survival of a civilization that arose about 7,000 years ago at the dynamic crossroads of cultures, the Iranian plateau, which at its peak stretched from Anatolia and the Caucasus through Transoxiana to China. This civilization endured countless invasions, absorbed diverse influences, and ultimately conquered its invaders through its eternal values. Shahnameh blends ancient myths and legends of the Iranian people with stories about the most significant events of their past. With 60,000 rhymed couplets, it describes the history of the Iranian world from its creation to the fall of the Persian Empire in the 7th century. The Arab conquest brought fundamental changes to economic, social, and cultural life, including the replacement of Zoroastrianism with Islam and Middle Persian, Pahlavi with Arabic as the dominant language. Yet, the Shahnameh provided the region's new rulers with a model of wise governance, while also revitalizing the Persian language in a form that later also became known as the Persian-Tajik language, preserving its uniqueness and extending its cultural influence. This new Persian literature was nurtured and promoted by the Iranian intermezzo, particularly the Samanids, who were notable representatives of the Eastern Iranian people. 1,000 years after its completion, Shahnameh remains one of the most popular texts in secular poetry. Its enduring appeal lies in its thematic foundation, the eternal struggle between good and evil, which transcends specific times and places.